There's no reason to recap the entire Walking Dead universe when we jump into Dixon, The Walking Dead, because this is a solo project, just 6 episodes, sort of like Loki in the Marvelverse, where we're just talking about Dixon. And so here's the Wikipedia summary, and tell me if you agree or not, because we both watched it. We'll both be able to talk about it. But Daryl washes ashore in France, the origin of the zombie virus, and struggles to piece together how he got there and why. The series tracks his journey across a broken but resilient France as he hopes to find his way back home. As he attempts his journey, though, the connections he forms along the way complicate his ultimate plan. Okay, so what do you think of that?
Well, we know why he got there.
Right? Like, it says how he got there and why. I think he doesn't straight up tell us, but you can tell he knows. Like, it's not like he had amnesia.
Well, not only that, Judith reminded me a little bit of Elsa Dutton from 1923 this episode.
1883?
1883, but in 1923, Elsa Dutton is the one that narrates that, right? And Judith, you kind of hear it in a voiceover at the beginning of this episode. Well, I think it's pretty obvious. He's trying to find Rick, and I give the show a lot of credit for that because every single person who watches The Walking Dead wants to know what happened to Rick.
Let's do a qualifier here. So if you haven't watched The Walking Dead before and you're just jumping into this might not be the podcast for you, because we're going to break this down scene by scene and just our thoughts on it, but we'll also be talking about the original series a lot. I don't think we'll have time to really segue into how the show came to be, any of that stuff. So let's do what we don't usually do. We try to avoid just going plot point by plot point, but I really want to do it with this one because it's an hour long and I feel like I just had so many thoughts. Starting with the first narration, which you're talking about, which is Judith saying, "You deserve a happy ending too." She was speaking to Daryl at that time, and obviously it affects him because he went off on this journey of self-discovery and also trying to find, I think, Rick and Michonne and the rest of the gang. But the thing about the way that they play it there is that voice clip is just so murmured and mumbled to me that I didn't understand it at first. I had to replay it a few times, and then I had to turn on subtitles. And I know later on they repeat the same narration.
They even show it.
Yes, they show it. That's right. But if you are just a common watcher, you may have forgotten that was what was said. And for me, I was like, well, this was really hard to pick up. Maybe they should have gotten a new cut of it.
It sounded inaudible. I had to turn on subtitles.
Yeah, so we both turned on the subtitles. Daryl's tied to the back of a skiff on the ocean.
Right, so I never saw the series finale.
Yeah, he just rides off on a motorcycle.
Yeah, I know, and I understand that we're probably going to get how he got in that position, but I was wondering for a quick second if that was just supposed to be a cliffhanger that we were getting actually resolved that was shown in the finale, or if this was just where they were deciding to start it.
Yeah, no, he says goodbye to Carol, and because originally this was supposed to be Carol and Daryl's show, right?
Yes.
But then Carol couldn't do it. I forgot the name of the actress, but she couldn't do it because she didn't want to film overseas. Mm-hmm. She still will appear in the series, just not as a main character, and so it was remade for just a Daryl storyline, and now he's on the back of this boat, but he's tied to it. And at the same time, it reminded me of One Piece because that was how we were introduced to Monkey. He wasn't tied to the back of the boat, but he was introduced on a boat with a seagull, right?
Yeah.
And we do see a seagull in this. But it also reminded me of Norman Reedus and that trailer that came out so long ago, the Hideo Kojima one.
Are you talking about the video
horror
game one?
Yes, because that's what it looked like. When he was on the back of the skiff and he was next to the beach, it looked like it was the same tone, the same atmosphere. And I was just like, is this a live action remake of Death Stranding? And then I remember the previous trailer before that. Do you remember that whole thing with the video game where they released a demo and then it got canceled, but it was still like an amazing demo?
Right, yeah.
And then like a few years later. But actually, Death Stranding didn't even come out until 2019. I didn't realize it because that trailer came out like 7 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't even know that.
But then it took years for it to actually come out as a game, and then it's still not released, I don't think, on like Mac or anything. And then so he's on the back of the skiff and he's coming into France, and we have to wonder how he got there.
I really like the way that it was shot. The first 30 minutes specifically, I really like the long shots.
Why the first 30 minutes and not the full episode?
Okay, so the first 30 minutes were what I wanted to see. They focused on Daryl Dixon. The last 30 minutes, I feel like, threw the episode away.
Well, the last 30 minutes introduced to you to what the rest of the series is going to be about. Like, The Walking Dead has always done one thing really well, even throughout its later seasons, which is like those non-talking introduction scenes, 10-minute long montages where it just like shows one person either traveling a long distance, getting through the zombie-ridden lands, surviving in just by themselves. They're always able to accomplish those in such a cool way. However, they never stick with it. After the introduction plays, that's when they usually start introducing a bunch of other characters because they realize that they need drama, they need people to be speaking, they need people to be doing things other than just walking the land.
It's not just that it didn't focus on Dixon as much in the last 30 minutes. It's that I feel like, and we'll get there, but they pulled from so many other things that do it so much better. In fact, some of my similarities are like Why the Last Man and The Last of Us, and also Sweet Tooth as well.
Okay, well, yeah, dystopian, futuristic TV shows.
But he gets off the boat, he's able to untie his hands.
This is the weird thing. He gets off that boat, it doesn't take him anything to untie his bonds. And the person who put him on the back of the boat, because it wasn't him, we find that out later. Yes. I didn't understand this. It was like Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean, where they just stuck him on a boat and it figured that he would die. Or they made him, they made him walk the plank and then figured he would die, and then he like strung together 2 sea turtles and survived. But like Daryl Dixon's thing is very similar because the last we've seen him, he was in like Georgia or wherever they say in the U.S. that they're from.
I think it was Georgia, yeah.
That's where they film it. I don't know if that's actually where it takes place. I forget. But the thing is that he would have made it all the way to France on the back of that skiff. That's impossible.
Especially with 3 weeks, no food,
So later on we find out that he was actually part of a big rig that was making its way to France, and then at the very end he jumped off onto an escape boat and got tied up on there. But then he unties himself, he gets to the beach, and the first thing he does, which I understand, you're very thirsty, you're sunburnt, you need water, is he runs up to just a random bucket there and he drinks a ton of seawater.
Yeah.
Because it's still in the shoreline. You can still see where the beach is flat, and there's no way that is fresh water.
I know, that's something I was surprised by.
So it's really weird. It's not desalinated water. And so like I would think that would make him sick, but it doesn't. I do get the Last of Us vibes that you're talking about, where the first 10 minutes are just really cool. He's scavenging. He finds a tape recording of a guy. He's listening to that, about the guy's sad story, and he's playing with a stuffed penguin. He also finds a harpoon. He also decides it's poncho time, and he sticks his poncho back.
So let's talk about that, because the 10 minutes when he's walking through France and the whole entire place is decrepit. It's torn down. I really like how it was shot. But it actually, Dead City, as much as I did not like that TV show, in fact, looking back on it, I gave it a 5, I'd probably give it a 4, but that was actually more closer related to how the comics were when the comics ended, because it seemed like civilization was kind of back to at least some type of starting point. Here, it seems like we were just watching another episode of The Walking Dead, where it's like there's no one around.
I mean, New York and France, very different. Yes. I mean, New York is super consolidated. You have, as they showed, many more rats, many more vermin, and all of that, the Maggie show that you were just talking about, Dead City.
Yeah,
it took place at nighttime, so it was super dark, so you couldn't really see anything, and there were zombies falling from more about the high rises the entire time.
Do you remember the first few scenes of Dead City where there was like a bar and there was people inside there drinking and
that was Middle America
stuff? Yeah, well, I'm just saying that like it seemed like it followed it more closer related to what was like when the comics ended.
Yeah, but this is like much more European. This is like you're seeing the streets are cobblestone, and like he's walking into places. He's seeing French signs all the time, which would warn him not to go into certain buildings, but he doesn't know French. Yeah. So he ends up going in there anyways. I think one of them's like hungry zombies are in here. And he's just like, all right, well, the weird thing about how they approach big buildings and warehouses is that you would think by now, especially with the amount of times they've gotten stuck in those.
Yes.
Like the governor got stuck in one. I remember Everybody Hates Chris. That dude got stuck in one.
It was the first few episodes where Merle stuck up the top of the building.
That you would make a noise as soon as you walk in to see if it like wakes up any zombies, and then that way you're able to get out of there before you actually wander in.
But these zombies were scary.
Yes. Well, the thing about these zombies is here's where the creativity points come in, and you got to give it up to The Walking Dead because it's finally, after however many years, introduced zombies that can do other things than just walk at a very slow pace and be walkers. The
Walking Dead zombies were always the least scary to me. I mean, you take in something like 28 Days Later, where those zombies, it takes like 5 seconds, and they don't even have to bite you, just blood gets into your eye. These zombies always walk slow, but yes, the acid zombies, they touch you and like your skin just starts burning. I was like, thankfully, this fits the horror genre it's going for.
Yeah, and not only do they burn you, but they also infect you that way. So we find out later that they have to cauterize those wounds that Daryl gets from that handprint to make sure that he doesn't turn. which is sort of a cure, I guess, for that type of zombie. Yeah. We also see in the next go-round that there's probably going to be fast zombies. Obviously not the same speed of like 28 weeks later, but like definitely faster than The Walking Dead. Maybe they should change the name. So Daryl, what did you think if they had like made it so he didn't talk the entire show?
I don't know how they would have been able to do that.
Because like follow the first 10 minutes and then at least for a full episode. They could have done it for one episode. That would have
gone long in tooth. I'm glad that they
I don't think so. I think that they no, absolutely not. I think they could have shown a full episode where he barely had to speak and maybe at the last moment, the last thing he says is like hello or something when he meets someone that he would actually work with.
One thing was clear from the trailer. This was going to be a lot darker and more dramatic take than any other Walking Dead spinoff that we had gotten up until this point.
It's funny because it reminded me a little bit of Elf.
Elf?
Yeah, the beginning reminds me of Buddy when he has to go from the North Pole all the way to New York, and we see him just like going over hilltops and stuff. Like Daryl does not choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah, really. I mean, he's going on mountains.
You've seen Dungeons and Dragons where the guy just walks right over the rock as opposed to around the rock. That's kind of Daryl's like motto. He's like, I know what direction I have to go, and I'm not going to get turned around. So he goes, and he's also like a Skyrim character in that way too. One of the things that annoys me about The Walking Dead, though, is that no character seems to just have bolt cutters around with them. I feel like that would be such an indispensable tool, and I feel like there'd be a lot more fencing that these guys would be running into that we don't see, and that would be something where it's like a bolt cutter would be the perfect weapon, but instead he just keeps that harpoon with him, as opposed to his, what does he normally have? The
crossbow.
The crossbow, thank you. And he gets one later on, of course, because he's Daryl, but for the first half of it, it's cool to see not only that, but also the zombies that are dead with the weird plants growing through them and stuff. Like it wasn't just the makeup department making cool looking zombies this time. It was dead zombies that looked like statues.
It was meeting my expectations, especially because Maggie and Negan were liked, but Daryl was especially loved for the first few seasons of The Walking Dead, so much so they decided not to kill him off in the first season, and after Dwight was introduced in the comics, he practically adopted the same traits that Daryl does.
Yeah, so why doesn't Dwight show up? Like, is Dwight going to be...
What, does Dwight show up even in the last few seasons of The Walking Dead?
Yeah, I think he does. That would have been a weird team up, like two Daryls.
well, in the comics, Dwight, I think, is supposed to be a protagonist. Yeah. And in the show, he's supposed to be an antagonist. He works for Negan, even though he doesn't like it. That was only
at the beginning. I'm pretty sure he was a good guy by the end. So you were saying, though.
He meets Maribel and Gulame.
Oh, no, you're jumping way ahead. Okay, wait. He sees a lot of French, first of all. He sees the hungry ones and the God loves you signs, and he just notices that like life is still around there. He even sees people in the background, and that's where he stumbles upon other living people, Maribel and, as you said,
Gulame. That's what I have it as.
Gulame. I don't know.
It's her dad. But the thing that I like that they do...
No, they never say it's her dad. She may have lied and said it was her dad, but I don't think that was her dad. Did you see how they killed him off? I don't think that was her dad.
Well, why I like what they did with her character is that they decided not to just make it where Daryl decides not to pick them up, because they try to get Daryl to come along with them.
I think you need to introduce them better. So like Daryl just stumbles upon their little camp site, and they have their apples there, and they have some food, and they at first say that they will trade him for medical supplies, which he does.
Gives them a first aid basket. He takes them.
So they're having a nice little conversation, and that's where she says she speaks some English. Her dad speaks less English, but like he's present. He's also supposed to be blind.
He has something wrapped around his eyes.
Well, yeah, that's just to kind of again make them seem more vulnerable than they actually are. That's when, very conveniently, right, this other set of, like, these two guys show up, and they seem to be a part of a Negan-type group.
They're part of the cause.
Yeah. So they're like an army, right?
Yes.
And they immediately start bullying Maribel and Willa. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I was starting to get annoyed by this point, because there was obvious a reason that, like, Daryl was going to need in order to have these other two.
Yeah, bullies just randomly appear. They just spawn up.
But it's not only that. It's like The Walking Dead does the same thing over and over again wherever they introduce a character, where it's like the protagonist, Daryl in this instance, has to say, no, I can't allow you to come along with me. And then there has to be something that happens that actually changes their mindset like 1 second later.
I don't think they were ever inviting him. They were just inviting themselves. They were like, hey, so if you can take us.
But that's why, like what you were talking about before, creativity points. Yeah. That's why I have to give them creative points, because I thought that the cause. Once Daryl saved them from the cause, they were just going to, all three of them were going to go on an adventure together. But no, what happens is that they end up killing the two people from the cause. They fight them.
They start attacking Maribel. She starts screaming. Daryl attacks the first guy, kills, and then his friend kills him, trying to kill Daryl. And then Daryl puts up his hand, even though the guy's pointing a gun at him. And the guy stops. The bully stops. He could have shot Daryl. This happens twice in the episode. Once later on, his brother does the same exact thing, I think, where Daryl sticks up his hand as a motive to stop the guy from killing him when that's the only thing that they want to do.
I think it
makes no sense.
I think that they were trying to show that the cause had some type of moral compass, even if that. But
they just killed their own.
No, and I understand that. But also, I really did like that part because I was not expecting that. You always see that at a TV show where someone has another person at gunpoint and one of them pointing the gun at them, and then still they just decided to shoot him anyways. And we see that Norman Reedus' face is like very messed up by it. But I think that, again, especially because the main person of the cause was that person's brother, right?
Well, we're getting ahead again, but I'm saying the fact that these two guys just show up and they seem like they have no morals, like you're saying they have morals. I don't say they have any morals. I'm saying that they were there to steal Maribel and probably do bad things to her, but instead they're stopped by Daryl putting up his hand.
I'm not saying they were good characters. I'm saying that I think, like you're saying, Daryl puts up his hand and the guy decides not to shoot him because he has some sense.
I think he's just stupid. I think that or lazy writing or something, but like that part made no sense to me. But yes, both of them end up dying. Daryl and Maribel and Guillaume are all there, and that's when Maribel and Guillaume beat up Daryl to a point where like they knock him over the head and then they steal his stuff.
I was so happy to see that. I was so happy to see it. Turns out that they were kind of evil. Yeah. Yes.
But then you get these nuns, very much like Daredevil. Where this one lady, especially Isabella, right?
Yeah.
That's her name, or is it Isabel?
It's Isabel.
Okay, Isabel, she shows up, she scares off Maribel and her dad, and she saves Daryl. And the next scene we see is like her part of a big old nun community, and they're called the Union of Hope. Not only have they survived, they're a bunch of fighting nuns, kind of Mrs. Davis style. Yes.
Or warrior nun. I was also thinking that this is the part that reminded me most of Y: The Last Man, because Daryl Dixon, even though we've seen other guys show up in this show so far, seems to be the only like male protagonist.
This is what doesn't make sense though. You've got this big old bully community. You said they were called the Cause, right? Yeah. And they're roaming the areas constantly, right? And they just let these group of women have this huge academy for themselves. Like, it doesn't make any sense after all these years that this group that doesn't seem anywhere as strong as some of the Walking Dead groups that have gotten destroyed over the time. Not even as strong as like Hilltop. Yeah. That they've just been allowed to exist on their own in this place, and no one's bothered them.
To me, I didn't think that it broke the suspension of disbelief. I was just willing to give the show
if it was out in the middle of nowhere, maybe, but like this was prime part of the city. So Daryl ends up there, and they cure him, and that's where he finds Laurent. And this is where people have started to compare Laurent, the special child orphan, the one boy that's there, and immediately they want to pass him off to Daryl, and they say, "You take him."
It's the turning point to the show when I started to hate it. I do not understand why the Walking Dead writers always feel like Daryl has to have something to do with kids. It happened with Sophia in season 2. Yeah. It happened with Beth in season 4.
So I think the Beth one was so successful that ever since then they're like, this contrast works. You have the Reese's peanut butter cup. You got the peanut butter and the chocolate. You got Daryl being all gruff, and you got the kid being all innocent.
But it even happened with Judith. I read this later on. Apparently, he becomes the father figure to Judith at the very last few seasons of The Walking Dead.
Game of Thrones. You're looking at the mountain. And
but they
Arya,
don't always have to do it. They don't always have to do it.
For the fact of the show being 6 episodes. But the Carl comparisons are what made me laugh, because people were like, oh man, he's a lot like Carl with the precociousness, where the kid is smarter than he's supposed to be, where he's wiser than he's supposed to be.
Was Carl ever like he smarter was than
by the end he's literally like giving speeches about how like the world should work and how like he sees a peaceful future.
Yeah, but even at the age that Carl was when Lawrence is,
well, that was the joke
more...
is that people were like, it's the new Carl, so it's like Carl, and it's like Lauren. All right. But yeah, so he's supposed to be the next Messiah, I guess.
That's crazy. Yeah.
It is a kind of a jump to believe that Isabel and the rest of the nuns have come to believe, based on like some drawings that this kid has done, that he is going to save the planet.
And the way he talks, yeah.
And the way he talks. so that he's like some sort of messenger. And again, that they're just going to pass him off to the first guy who they have to save, as if he's going to be able to take him across the land. That's where the Last of Us comparisons come in, because it's very much like Ellie.
It's almost entirely like the Last of Us.
Yeah.
That's why I
Pedro
hate it so much. The first 30 minutes felt like it was going somewhere different, and then the last 30 minutes was just stuff that we've seen before, either from The Walking Dead or from other TV shows.
I didn't like how they made Daryl so vague about how he got there. Like, I get that he knows and that he just wants to get back home at this point, but it felt so pushy towards, you have to watch the rest of the series to find out.
Yeah.
Rather than him just saying, well, I actually came to look for some friends and I didn't find them. I ended up on the back of a skiff and tied up, and I survived, but I need to find my way back to America.
Did you notice he didn't even say someone? He kept referring to the people as something. And
yes.
I was like, why not at least make it more specific?
Because again, you deserve a happy ending too. He was looking for something, but he's not willing to say what that thing was. And unless they're about to say that his dog got lost on a trip to France, then I'm just not buying it. Or maybe his motorcycle. Can you believe that? Like, he just followed his motorcycle to France. So he gets all healed up and cured, and he has a bath, and he has that scene where, you know, when you're in the bath and you go whoosh, like out of the water, that they always do in TV and movie, but you would never do in like real life.
Yeah, and I didn't. But here's the thing: I did not mind the scene where he was in the bath, and when he was also talking to Isabel and like talking about their scars and everything.
Did you recognize Isabel?
No,
same lady from Harry Potter, the fourth movie, Fleur Delacour or whatever her name was. She was supposed to be like the hotness.
No
of the
idea.
Time. You don't remember the books either, I assume.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. So he has a bunch of scars. We see those on the back of his thing too. That's another cliche shot.
Did that happen in season 9? Because I remember they tried to do something in season 9 of The Walking Dead where Michonne had scars, and they didn't tell you how she got them until like later on into the season. Mm-hmm. And Daryl, I'm assuming it was the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's been done in every series ever. Is they try to show a character's, like even in Halt and Catch Fire, which you wouldn't expect a series like that. The guy has scars.
But I was saying, did Daryl get those scars?
You want to make yourself seem mysterious and cool? Just give yourself some scars.
But did Daryl get those scars at the same time that Michonne did?
I thought he got them as a kid, because he even says, like, my dad was blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Him and Merle did not have a great childhood. We already knew that. It also reminded me a little bit of Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, as far as the community of women that were just like in the abbey in the courtyard, and how they didn't accept males usually, and how even they got Isabel got blowback for bringing Daryl there. They're like, this is not the type of guy that we like to have in this community, and she's like, no, he's going to save everybody, and then he ends up not doing that. He ends up getting everybody killed because all the cause guys come hunting him because Maribel gives them false information, which she does to sort of save her life.
Yeah,
and then that's
I was really annoyed that we got Maribel again, because
I think
now
she's coming back.
Yeah, oh no, she's going to be a character in the series.
But she's not a main character.
I thought though that her introductory scene, if that was the only scene we had got from her, just to show how people are in France at this moment, I think that would have been fine.
What's Crackin' Noob? Her What's Crackin' Noob scene? You thought that was going to be her ending?
Yes, I thought that was it. I thought that once they robbed Daryl, that was going to be all we saw of her, and then they had to go back to her.
No, they had to introduce the villains somehow. So the villains show up, and they're, again, the Cause Army, and the guy sees that his brother has been killed, which is supposed to be a foil to Daryl, and how Merle died, and how that closeness has guided his entire like trajectory of his character arc. Same thing with this guy. It's like, what if the reverse Daryl happened? Except this guy just doesn't feel like a Daryl character. He just feels like, again, another bully.
He feels like a normal, like not even an antagonist. He just seemed like a normal guy. I was glad that the Cause seemed way more intimidating than the villains in The Walking Dead Dead City, but it just doesn't seem like they're still intimidating at all.
So again, you have the Nun Lair, the Academy, the Courtyard, where these bad guys show up at the door, and the nuns immediately let them in. Another reason why they wouldn't survive 12 years there. But not only are they're posting things about themselves all over the place. So it's not like anybody even has to look that hard to find them. So once they get there, these bad guys break in. Conveniently, just as Daryl has left and decided he is not taking Laurent with him because he's not religious and he doesn't believe in that stuff and he thinks the kid would be better off there, he sees that the bad guys have broken in. He runs in after them, and then he starts to take them out, John Wick style, one at a time. Yeah, and so then it's like separate and conquer. Eventually, a lot of the nuns have died. There's literally only like 2 or 3 left, including Isabel, including Laurent, and that's where Daryl and them, instead, because the bad guy gets away. The main bad guy gets away.
There's only one, right?
There's one, but like he can go back to his squad. Like they're the cause. So there's probably a whole group of them. And instead of leaving, Daryl and the nuns that have survived and Laurent all decide to have a campfire moment at the place. They don't leave. Like the guy decides not to do that. The bully decides not to go and get reinforcements like he should. But at the same time, it made no sense why they wouldn't try to get out of that place before it gets like bombarded
if this was Negan's group, they would have been dead 100% by this point.
Well, you would have thought that Daryl would be wiser, but at this point Daryl has agreed to take Laurent and the rest of them as far as he can across France so that he can get to some port so that he can escape. And then in the last scene we get the reason why Daryl even showed up to begin with, which was this other villain who I assume is going to be a bigger villain than... why do I not have the guy's written name down? The bully
I don't have it either. But
but Gannett, is that her name?
Yes.
Or Jeanette? She's not very intimidating. She keeps on trying to scare the captain, and it makes it seem as if the captain of the boat that Daryl was originally a part of before he tried to create a mutiny and then got kicked off, that guy is going to die because she taps him on the shoulder. She comes in and she's like, okay, so where is the guy who caused all the problems and screwed up this whole experiment that we're trying to do? They're very vague about it. And he responds with, well, we let him go. Then she's like, go find him. There's 200,000 people still in France. He is halfway across the entire country. How do they expect to find this random American dude? Like, it's so strange that, like, I understand bounty hunters exist now in this world because we've seen them in the Maggie show, but the idea that she would waste the resources on trying to find Daryl when it doesn't even seem like Daryl has any means or reason to go back and try to destroy them.
I'm also worried that the show is introducing too many villains, because if they introduce too many more, it's just going to be too hard to keep track of which one's which, I feel.
So far it's been 2.
Yes,
so
why do we even need Jeanette?
Because I think that's the bigger storyline. People seem mostly excited about the fact that they've introduced her because I think they've read in the comics or something like a bigger storyline that has to deal with like that group or something.
Well, look, I went back to look at the trailer after I saw this episode, and I saw that there's a scene where there's an explosion on a boat. So I assume in the 6 episodes...
Well, did you stick around for afterwards? Because they even showed the sort of trailer for the rest of the season.
No, I decided not to watch it because I probably will be watching the rest of the series.
Okay.
But I do think that we're going to get one of those backflash episodes just completely as to how Daryl was where he was in the first scene.
I do have a few thoughts just overall, and one of them is that this doesn't feel as much about like a Daryl storyline as it does maybe a Morgan storyline.
Yes.
Where he had a connection because of his son, and also he's very partially religious, sometimes when it benefits him. And Daryl is always just kind of veered away from that type of mission. And then at the same time, I do have a question because they killed the one brother at the very beginning, the first bully, by stabbing him through the back. And this has always just confused me, is that if you have your spine lacerated, if you were in a wheelchair and then you get bitten by a zombie, can you suddenly walk?
Well, it somehow cures you.
I'm trying to remember because the one woman in The Last of Us in the first episode, she was bedridden, or she was sitting in the chair. She couldn't walk very well. She gets up, right?
Yes.
Or she crawls.
I remember in season 3 they tried to explain how the zombie bite infected you and what you could do and what you still didn't know, but I don't think that they ever actually explicitly stated.
But when the brother had the thing through his body, through his spine in the back, he was still walking around just fine. And then I'm going to have to research exactly how that works, but I'll agree that I will also jump in and watch the rest of the show.
I think that this is definitely the best Walking Dead spinoff so far, even including Fear the Walking Dead. However, I just feel like there's too many cliches and tropes for me to give this a passing grade. I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10.
Oh, I will give it probably a 7 out of 10. That's a C. It has an 8.3 on IMDb right now. Most of the reviews have said the exact same thing, that it's the best of the Walking Dead future series. I am a little skeptical as to how well it's going to pull off this arc between Laurent and how they're going to justify his specialness, you know?
Yeah.
Because I am just a little tired of the whole special kid.
But the competition for being the best Walking Dead TV show is really not that deep. I was glad that they got rid of the campy kind of comedic humor of the last few seasons of The Walking Dead or of Walking Dead Dead City. Yeah. That's the one that I'm really comparing it to because that one just infuriated me with how bad that was.
I have no problem with the future Rick Michonne relationship, but I would have rather seen those movies with Rick by himself. Yes. Because of how good that first episode, that first season was. Yes, he had a family, but it was mostly his story. He was the guiding force of it. And him stuck alone in this other place, we might get 1 or 2 episodes of that, but I think Michonne's going to catch up to him real quick, and that's going to bum me out just a bit. So, I think that right now, Daryl Dixon is the best of the bunch. Thanks. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.